In this presentation, we will discuss the importance of the 30-Year War. In the early part of the 17th century, Europe was a complex system of diversified cultures, economies, and for the first time in a number of years, competing religions. Language, as we believe it to be today, was not the main factor in uniting citizens of Europe during the 17th century. Religion played a large role in the formations of cities, towns, and even countries, and significantly impacted the political decisions of leaders in European nations. Protestantism, Calvinism, Catholicism, and Lutheranism, and other sects of these religions spread throughout many different regions of Europe, which significantly fueled tensions between rivaling countries. Not surprisingly, this religious tension between the rivaling states would prove to shatter the stability of the European region. By 1618, one of the bloodiest wars in Europe would begin that would last for 3 decades. The 30 Years' War destroyed religious obsession that was a main characteristic of old medieval Europe, affirmed the increasing secularization of powerful nations, and displayed to the world the rise of rivalries between European superpowers. In order to understand the origins of the 30 Years' War, it is important to recognize the extent of the religious disunity within Europe. As seen in this picture, there were 4 major religions that were present in Europe during the 1600s. Calvinism took hold all throughout Scotland, as seen here, and in smaller territories within the region of Germany, as seen in this picture here. Spain and Portugal, as seen here, were heavily Roman Catholic. France was primarily Roman Catholic, although there were a few areas of Protestant minorities, as seen in this brownish color. Lutheranism remained strong in the northeastern part of the Holy Roman Empire, here this yellowish color, and Roman Catholicism was a dominant force in Eastern Europe in the brown, although there were Protestant minorities in that region. As demonstrated by this photo, Germany during the early 1600s was the region in Europe that was the most complex in terms of religious and political disunity. In its early years, a majority of the region had been Roman Catholic, with small minority communities of Calvinists and Lutherans. Lutherans, although small in terms of sheer numbers of followers in 1500, were making significant territorial gains by the early 1600s, and by 1608, Protestant states within Germany formed a union in order to defend these significant territorial gains. In order to better protect themselves against the advancing forces of the Catholics, the Protestant Union allied with the Dutch, English, and the French. Seeing this as a threat to their well-being, Catholic states within Germany formed a union of their own and looked to Spain as their protector. With the creation of these alliances, tensions were at an all-time high. This region of Germany had become a loaded gun, poised for discharge. Because of the additional political agendas on the part of European superpowers, this region of Germany would prove to facilitate direct conflict between rivaling nations. Additionally, because the treaty between the Spanish and the Dutch was set to expire in 1621, it appeared as though a revival of the Spanish-Dutch War was imminent. And this picture here is a picture of the original Spanish-Dutch War. And the Spaniards also wished to make significant territorial gains in Central Europe. Finally, France saw this alliance as an opportunity to prove its power to the rest of the world. The power of France trumped that of all other European nations, and the French knew that by participating in any conflict, they would be able to demonstrate just how powerful they could be. Because of all of these issues, and because of a desire for religious unity and power, the 30 Years' War began. Now, the actual fighting during the 30 Years' War was not as important as the outcome. The Peace of Westphalia would completely alter the stability of Europe and was fundamental in launching Europe into the modern era. For the first time since the Council of Constance, diplomats, political leaders, and religious leaders met in one place in order to deal with primarily political issues. Leaders from France, Spain, Sweden, and Netherlands, Portugal, Italy, and other nations, as well as the Pope, met to discuss the outcome of the war. In 1640, with so many important and influential leaders present, these Europeans were forced to discuss some of the first modern international laws, borders of nations, and affairs of the state, all of which demonstrate the increasing secularization of Europe. Independent states with different forms of governments who followed their own laws, formed their own alliances, and coined their own money were created. For the first time in European history, Europeans were forced to recognize the true differences between competing states. The Peace of Westphalia marked a truly remarkable change in European politics and religion. Religion, for the first time in European history, was no longer the main focus of politics. The Peace of Westphalia created one of the first great modern nations in Europe. The creation of the Dutch as a result of the 30 Years' War perfectly exemplifies the transformation that occurred within Europe following the Peace of Westphalia. Nations that had economies based on capitalism with somewhat democratic forms of government and an established machine industry were not uncommon. Most notably, these aspects of the modern state were demonstrated in countries like the United Provinces, also known as the Dutch Republic. During and after the 30 Years' War, like many modern states today, the United Provinces relied heavily on their wealth and diplomacy rather than actual fighting. Moreover, as is the case in most countries in the modern world, the Dutch Republic adopted a policy of total religious toleration. Prior to the 30 Years' War, there were few nations that adopted a policy as accepting as this. Certain rights were given to Jews, Catholics, Calvinists, and even Mennonites, all of whom were religious minorities in their country. Finally, an example that demonstrates the progressiveness and contemporariness of the Dutch Republic is their system of banking. In a time when there were hundreds, if not thousands, of different forms of currency, the Bank of Amsterdam was the only bank in Europe that could accept multiple types of currency from around the world in exchange for a gold florin, which they themselves minted. The Dutch Republic was one of the first great modern Western civilizations, and had the Peace of Westphalia not occurred, the Dutch would have never truly become a nation. Although all of these changes in European society, as exemplified within the Dutch Republic, were small changes, they clearly show that a fundamental change in European society, culture, and ideology had occurred. No longer was the focus of each nation fixed on the ideas of religion, but rather they were focused on ideas such as nation building, the gathering of wealth, and political diplomacy, all of which were direct results of the 30 Years' War.